My parents set their store on fire and tried to frame me for an insurance scam. My girlfriend supported their lies so she could run away with my brother. Investigators found their messages and video proof. Now they're going to prison, and everything they wanted to steal from me is now mine. My parents set their store on fire and tried to frame me for an insurance scam. That truth hit me while I stood across the street, watching smoke fold into the night like a bad secret finally exhaling. Sirens braided the air. Glass popped. My phone buzzed with messages that felt rehearsed, urgent, false. They said my name too quickly. I saw my father's jaw set the way it did when he'd already decided the story. I saw my mother cry without tears, and beside them, my girlfriend didn't look at me at all. She squeezed my brother's hand just once, small, decisive. That's when I understood the second cut. She was backing their lie so she could leave with him clean. I didn't shout. I didn't run. I stood still and let the cameras watch me breathe. Investigators moved quietly, like chess players. Messages surfaced. A video surfaced. Truth, patient and sharp, slid into place. The fire burned out. Their plan didn't. I grew up inside that store, sweeping floors after school, counting change by feel, learning early how silence can be mistaken for weakness. My parents called it the family business, but it was never shared equally. I was the reliable one, the background hum. My brother was the spark. My parents fed sparks. They leaned on hums. I learned to listen more than I spoke, to notice what people forgot to hide when they assumed I wasn't watching. Dates cancelled because family needs me. Promises delayed because you understand. I always did. That became my role. Understanding, absorbing, stepping aside. My girlfriend liked that about me at first. She said I was steady. She said I made things easy. Over time, easy turned into invisible. She laughed louder at my brother's jokes, lingered when he talked about leaving town, about money that could be freed if someone was brave enough. At home, plans were discussed over my shoulder. Decisions were announced, not shared. I was trusted with keys, passwords, late nights, never with truth. Being underestimated isn't loud. It's a slow erosion. You don't notice what's gone until the ground gives way. So when the fire started, and my name was offered up like kindling, I recognized the pattern. I just didn't interrupt it. The days after the fire were quiet, in the way a room gets quiet when someone important has already decided you're guilty. Conversations paused when I entered. Voices softened, not out of kindness, but caution. My mother asked questions with answers already chosen. My father spoke to me like a clerk who'd miscounted the register, polite, disappointed, final. My brother avoided my eyes, then overcorrected, smiling too much. He called me man and buddy, words he never used before. My girlfriend stood a half step away from me, always angled toward him. When investigators asked for phones, she hesitated, just a breath too long, then laughed it off like nerves. Her laugh didn't reach her eyes anymore. I noticed how my parents emphasized responsibility when they said my name, how they praised my brother's ambition while implying my caution was fear. At dinner, forks scraped plates in uneven rhythms. No one asked how I was sleeping. No one asked where I'd been that night. They didn't need to. The story was already circulating, smooth and convenient. What hurt wasn't the accusation. It was the confidence. The way they assumed I'd fold, apologize, carry it quietly like everything else. They mistook my silence for consent. I let them. Silence, I'd learned, makes people careless. The moment it shifted wasn't loud. It was a pause, too long, when the lead investigator asked who had access to the store's security system. My father answered quickly, too quickly. He said my name before the question fully landed. Like he'd rehearsed it alone in the car. I watched the investigator's pen stop. Just for a second. I saw it because I was watching for it. Years of being ignored had trained me to read the margins. That night, I didn't confront anyone. I went home and opened the old laptop I'd kept out of habit, not hope. I scrolled through backups no one remembered I made. Camera logs, message threads synced automatically. A video my brother once bragged about deleting. Still there, tucked inside a cloud folder he never checked twice. I realized then that I didn't need to prove my innocence by arguing. I just needed to stop protecting people who had never protected me. That was the real decision, not revenge, clarity. When investigators called again, I answered calmly. I told them I might have something they'd want to see. I didn't explain. I didn't editorialize. I sent the files and closed the laptop. For the first time since the fire, I slept without rehearsing conversations in my head. Whatever happened next wouldn't depend on my voice. It would depend on the truth, laid out exactly as it was. I treated it like any other problem. I'd been trusted with but never credited for. Methodical, contained, clean. I organized everything by date and device. labeling files the way accountants label losses. No commentary, just sequences. Messages lining up with purchases. Deleted chats mirrored on backups. A short clip showing my parents inside the store after hours. Faces uncovered, moving with purpose. Another clip. My brother's reflection in the glass as he filmed. I called a lawyer a friend once recommended. Someone who specialized in insurance fraud cases. I didn't tell him a story. I asked questions. What mattered? What held weight? What stayed quiet? He told me to let investigators do their job and not warn anyone. Silence again, this time intentional. I changed passwords, froze shared accounts, documented ownership percentages they'd always promised to formalize later. Found the clause they assumed I'd never read. It was there, clean and devastating. I didn't block my girlfriend. I let her talk. People reveal more when they think the door is still open. She complained about timing, about pressure, about needing a fresh start. None of it sounded like love. All of it sounded useful. I never smiled while doing any of this. Revenge wasn't the point. Control was. Precision was. I was done being the background hum. I was setting the tempo now quietly, until the room had no choice but to listen. The payoff arrived without ceremony. No courtroom theatrics. No raised voices. Just doors closing softly, one after another. Investigators returned with warrants and neutral faces. Phones were taken. Accounts were traced. Timelines were rebuilt with a patience my family never had. I watched from a chair in the hallway as my parents realized the story no longer belonged to them. My father tried to explain a detail no one asked about. My mother reached for my arm, then stopped, as if remembering I was no longer safe to touch. My brother unraveled fastest. He talked too much. He always had. The video did the rest. Him filming, laughing. The fire still small enough to control. Intent, clear as daylight. My girlfriend wasn't arrested, just exposed. Her messages played back in a quiet room, her voice steady, transactional. She didn't look at me when she left. She didn't have to. Weeks later, the store was legally mine, accounts unfrozen, ownership clarified. Everything they tried to take returned without apology. I didn't celebrate. I walked through the empty space once, listening to my footsteps echo where shouting used to live. The fire had taken what was flammable. The truth had taken the rest. Silence settled again, but this time it worked for me. The fallout wasn't dramatic. It was awkward, slow, human. Neighbors avoided eye contact at first, then overcorrected with sympathy that arrived too late to be useful. Old friends reached out with messages that started with "I didn't know what to say" and ended with nothing at all. Reputation doesn't snap back. It drifts, then settles somewhere new. My parents' absence left a vacuum people didn't know how to acknowledge. Holidays thinned out, conversations shortened. My brother's name became something people lowered their voices around. As for my girlfriend, she vanished from the story the way she'd entered it, quietly, looking for the next open door. What surprised me was how light I felt. Not relieved, clear. The store wasn't just an asset anymore. It was proof. Proof that I hadn't imagined the pattern. Proof that being calm isn't the same as being weak. I stopped waiting for apologies. I'd never get and started measuring myself by what I could build without permission. Why should anyone care? Because betrayal doesn't always come screaming. Sometimes it wears familiar faces and speaks gently. Because silence can be survival or strategy, depending on who controls it. And because reclaiming your name, your work, your life doesn't require rage. It requires patience, truth, and the courage to let consequences do their job. I don't think about them every day anymore. That's how I know it worked. Not the prison sentences or the legal wins, distance. Space where noise used to be. I kept the store, but I rebuilt it differently. New systems, new faces, clear contracts, nothing that relies on trust without structure. Peace, I learned, is designed. I'm slower now in a good way. I choose carefully. I listen, but I don't disappear. When someone mistakes my calm for compliance, I correct it early, quietly. I've stopped explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. The future feels practical, not dramatic. Expansion plans that make sense. Evenings that end without rehearsing defenses. Relationships that don't require me to shrink so others can feel taller. I don't need closure conversations or last words. The truth already said everything. Sometimes I walk past the rebuilt storefront at night. Lights low, glass clean, my reflection steady. I think about how fire reveals what was already broken and how patience reveals who people really are. They wanted to erase me, use me, leave me with ashes and blame. Instead, they gave me something better. Clarity. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't chase them. I just stepped out of the story they wrote and finished one of my own.